Earlier, I talked to Adam Thompson about the controversial use of the death penalty. I asked him why Texas executes so many inmates.
Texas tends to be a more conservative state. There's a very big uprise in terms of prosecution and certain types of penalties relating to those prosecutions, and they unfortunately favor the death penalty and have no problem enforcing it. It's unfortunate for the basic fact that many people who go on death row, and if you looked at Texas history of the 500 people that were predominantly on death row, it's going to be a lot of individuals that come from very poor economic backgrounds, minorities, people that just don't have the access to good representation to really challenge the cases that are brought by the government. So you have a situation where a lot of people end up on death row that really didn't get the greatest representation and really had their rights defended at trial. And now their life is hanging in the balance because of the death penalty.
And I guess the fact that Texas is a very conservative state has something to do with it as well.
Oh, absolutely. You're going to get, the overall viewpoint of that majority of the state. And in a lot of southern states, for example, they still favor the death penalty because they want to demonstrate a very hard position on crime. Regardless of statistics and studies that may show the death penalty is ineffective, it does nothing to thwart crime or murder or do anything to make it reduce in any way, shape, or form, they still feel that having it on the books hangs as a deterrent. But I just think that studies have shown that's just plain wrong.
You mentioned the southern states. Here's another southern state, Georgia. Now, Georgia is scheduled to execute a man on Monday. His name is Warren Hill. He's been found to be intellectually disabled. That's the legal term that they're using. In other words, he's mentally disabled. Is that not a violation of the U.S. Constitution, the protections on unusual and cruel punishment?
Absolutely. The Eighth Amendment protects all of us from cruel and unusual punishment. And certainly an individual who doesn't have the same mental capacity as other individuals shouldn't be held to the same standards. When a case involving this type of individual goes to trial, you're going to have a different level of intent that they have in their mind. And because of that reduced level of intent, the courts have held that you really can't hold them to the same standards as everyone else, and they shouldn't face the same sentencing guidelines, meaning that if there's people eligible for death sentences, that shouldn't apply to this classification of people. And in fact, the Supreme Court has issued a ruling in Atkins versus Virginia that says that mentally challenged or intellectually challenged individuals will not face the death penalty. Yet, regardless of this decision, and it was a 6-3 decision, states that still enforce the death penalty seem to just be thumbing their noses at the Supreme Court decision and going against it. And Georgia is exactly doing this. Although it's a clear decision, it's on the books, it should be enforced because that's the standing precedent for this country. They're still going to execute this individual sometime next week. And that's completely wrong, and it's completely contrary to law.
Right. You know, the death penalty was reinstated in the United States in 1976. What were the circumstances at that time that made the justices of the Supreme Court reinstate the death penalty? And is there a likelihood that that ban on the death penalty could at some point come back?
Well, hopefully it will come back because, as I said before, it's ineffective. Studies have shown that the death penalty does not reduce crime. It doesn't deter people. The majority of crimes or deaths that do take place, the majority of them are crimes of passion or things that are not premeditated murder. I don't think then it's going to have any impact on all those cases. Unless you're planning a murder out, then you might think, should I do murder or not do murder because the penalty is X? That rarely happens. So the death penalty does not play a part in any of this. I think that the reason that the view on the death penalty has changed over the years is it really depends who's sitting on the Supreme Court at the time. If you have a majority-controlled conservative bench, then conservative viewpoints are going to be pushed. They're going to be adopted. And pro-death penalty, pro-hard-on crime is, historically a conservative position. And normally a liberal viewpoint on this topic is no death penalty, life imprisonment or life with parole, and try to do rehabilitation to improve our society. The two sides are always butting heads, and depending on who's control at the time, that's the way that the Supreme Court is going to rule and come down, and that's going to be the law of the land.
Adam Thompson, thanks for joining us, sir.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.